I am Yamato Cannon, and this is Muffin, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is Valdes, a.k.a. Brendan Valdes, which, by the way, there's no mystery there, there's no alias. That's the question I have at the beginning. Was there ever an alias? Was there, secretly back in the day an alias and you removed it?
Yeah, not really for casting. Actually, when I first started casting, I was Brendan, which I think was worse. And then eventually I was like, I don't want to change my name so late in my career, because it happened around, 2015, 2016. I thought it was late in my career at the time.
Okay.
That was 3-4 years in. But yeah, I changed it to my last name. I just thought it would sound better. I've had IDs. The one I used to have was Gruple, which was very not good, which is why I didn't use that for casting. Okay. So yeah, that's basically it. So I settled on Valdes.
Okay, so there's actually a story which I know not that many people for some bizarre reason know in your origin, which is, so I've always remembered, I've watched the entire history of Korean League of Legends, basically, as in, even though I didn't watch the exact first Azubu tournaments, I did that thing where you can't do it now sadly anymore unless you know Korean people have access to their services. But you back in the day you used to be able to go back and watch the VODs. And so I obviously originally came to it through Monte and DoA, etc. But then when I went back and watched the season 2 stuff, I was like, well, now they're not even here, because it was you and Mole Trap basically. So the story goes basically you actually essentially got your start in esports, something out of a movie. They did a contest, some fucking 80s movie. They did a contest for casting with Azubu, and you won this competition and got to come to Korea for League. Give me some background, because here's the thing I need the background on there. This is really early in League of Legends. How do you even, how can you even be sort of an amateur wannabe caster so early? But also there can be a contest for casting. And plus, what is the contest like? What are they asking you to do? Give me some background on this. It sounds crazy. Were you really a complete nobody in esports before this?
An absolute nobody. I was really into StarCraft 2 when that first came out. We got to start way back when I wasn't even thinking about League of Legends. And I thought I would want to be a pro gamer, actually. I was really into, the pro scene, the competitive esports scene. I really wanted to try my best at doing that. But I realized eventually that I just wasn't playing enough, because I think what I had was ladder anxiety. So I just couldn't play enough StarCraft. I was like, I really like this game. The idea of being a pro sounds great, but doesn't seem like it's for me. So eventually I went off to college for a year, and while I was there, League of Legends actually came out, and I came back home afterwards, and I was just grinding only League, and I didn't have any ladder anxiety there. I was I could just grind all day long. I could do this for 16 hours a day, and I did sometimes. So I was like, okay, this is great. I can go pro in League. So I was very highly ranked on the NA server back in season 1, maybe even before that. I played against Dyrus one time. I think that was my call to fame. The one game I played against Dyrus. I think that was the only pro player that I ever played against. But I was pretty proud. I was pretty highly ranked, so I wasn't sure how far I was going to go as a pro, and I never joined any team, because what happened was I was just browsing. I forget even what. It might have been Team Liquid or something. It was an old forum, and Azubu had put out a a advertisement for a raffle, as you mentioned, which wasn't even for casting. It had nothing to do with casting. Okay. It was for come to OGN, come to Korea. We'll give you a 5-day tour of Seoul, and we will give you VIP tickets to the season.
Oh, so it's more just being a super fan, basically, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Absolutely. So I was like, okay, I'm never going to win this. I almost even closed out the tab. I was like, nah, this is a waste of time. Imagine if I did. But I was like, okay, I'll just put in the information. It's pretty basic. And so I put in the raffle. I thought nothing of it. I forgot about it. And then 2 weeks later, they contacted me hey, you've won this raffle. You can come to Korea for 5 days. And I told my parents, and they were like, this is definitely a scam.
Of course. That sounds like you're just going to disappear with all your shit stolen or you'd be dead or something, right?
They're going to steal your organs over there.
Yeah.
It was just so bizarre, because for me, I thought okay, maybe I just got really lucky, but also I could hardly believe it, but I wasn't going to turn down the opportunity, because I was very into Korea for a long time through StarCraft 2 and watching all of like GSL and Tasteless and Artosis, watching so many seasons, even like
Oh,
DoA
did
and
it?
Wolf
Put it
as
this
well.
way: are you someone that obviously a lot of people who moved for the casting reasons? Are you someone where Korea was like the mecca of esports at that famous line? Was it like did it have some crazy mystique to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was like pretty dead set on going to Korea. I thought it was going to be through maybe being a pro gamer. Like I wanted to join like the Gome House, you know, I don't know if you remember from StarCraft 2. Like I sent an email to Torch, who I think was running it at the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Or he was like involved in finding people. And I was like, listen, I really want to do this. This is my dream to become a SC2 pro. And he was like, well, maybe you got to be like higher ranked, and basically gave me a nice letdown. Like, we don't know who you are. You're just some random kid. Go practice, and then maybe we'll consider you. So I was like very dead set on going to Korea for a long time. Little did I know that my first time was going to be through that raffle, because eventually my parents were like, okay, it seems legit. You know, this is a real company. I showed them everything. Like, they're sponsoring OGN, and it's all through this big Korean company, this corporation. Like, I don't think there's anything to be too worried about. Worst case scenario, I mean, here are the flight tickets. Like, they seem to be real. Like, this is a real flight. Like, we checked everything, and it seemed legit. And I was talking with the people, and so I went over for just 5 days, and I thought that would be it. Like, I would just go and have like an awesome Korea trip, and like get to finally go there and live out my dream for 5 days, and that would be it. But I ended up, over the 5 days, becoming very good friends with one of the guys who ran the raffle, basically. He was just like an employee at Azubu. And I asked him, like, one night we were getting pretty drunk, like on the last night, like the night before I was supposed to leave. And I was like, listen, I really want to stay. Is there anything I could do? Can I do some work? Can I just extend my trip somehow? And he was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. You can stay at my friend's house. And like, I slept on this guy's floor for a couple of weeks. But he also was like, if you want to get a job, maybe we could, because Azubu had like it was like a global team where they would make like videos and stuff. And
Yeah.
they were like, maybe we could use an English speaker or something. So he made me, after drinking all night, like go back to the house, open my old laptop, and he was like, just write a Diablo 3 guide, because the game had just come out. And I was like, I've never written any guide before, like, because he was just thinking maybe I could work for the company as like a writer, or, you know, because it was, Azuba at the time was like I think it started as people know it as like the streaming service, but before that it was just like a gaming website.
Yeah,
they
some
just
sort of
made
media company,
articles.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
the idea,
like,
by the way, the
let's see if we
premise
can
here,
write
as far as I can tell, is basically you're trying to find any way to get a job here, and this guy's just trying to find, like, to do you a favor and try and find any role you can go in, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally anything. I was like, I'll take anything. I'll do anything. And at that point, I had no idea that I would cast or do anything like that. So I was just like, he was like, okay, download Diablo 3. The game just came out. Write like a 5-page article, like a guide on one of the characters, one of the classes. And I was like, okay. So I did that, and I stayed up all night until like 10 a.m. and I sent it to him, and they were going into work the next day. Classic old Korean culture, you know, drinking all night and then going straight to work the next day. Whereas I slept in after doing all that. But basically, I got the word that night that, hey, they liked your article. You know, they seem to want to hire you. You're going to work at Azubu. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And for about 2 weeks, I extended my flight. And of course, my parents were like, what are you doing?
Sure.
Like, you got to come back home. You got to, because back home I was going to university. I actually got scouted to play like D3 ice hockey.
Oh, wow.
But my first season, like my first semester, my first year, I guess, it didn't go very well. I only played like one game. So I was planning on taking a year off and like playing a lot more hockey, getting bigger, getting stronger. And going back. So my dad was like, you got to get back into this. Like, you can't spend any more time in Korea. Like, come on, this trip is over. You've had your fun vacation, et cetera, et cetera. But I was like, hockey was, I liked hockey, but it was at that point the last thing on my mind. I'm like, I'm going to make this thing work in Korea. So for about 2 weeks, I just was there, mostly just like they hadn't gotten me into the company yet. Like they can't just get me in the next day. But I think the next week I started going in and they were trying to figure out what work I would do. And yeah, so I extended it for like 2 weeks, and then that ended up being a little bit longer to like 3 months because I did like an internship for 3 months. They had an internship visa I was able to get. And during that internship, Torch, which was one of the casters for League of Legends Champions Korea, I guess it was OGN Champions back then, Season 2, it was Moletrap and Torch, and Torch had to leave for his brother's wedding, I think it was, towards the end of the season. And they were like, at that point in esports, there wasn't really anyone they could get. Like, nowadays in Korea, we have, a pretty large group of people that could, in the worst case scenario, just fill in or something. But now, at that time, it was like, they knew nobody. So OGN went to their sponsor, who's Azubu, who I was working for, and they're like, is there anybody who speaks English who knows League of Legends that can cast? And Azubu asked me, and that's where like my history of playing League of Legends at a somewhat high level came in, because they were like, yeah, this guy, he wanted to be pro. Like, he was actually pretty high level. Like, I think he could be good at doing it. And for me, I was like a very introverted kid. I was not outgoing at all. I had no idea that I could do any kind of broadcast. I was like, it seemed very daunting to me, but I understood that it was a huge opportunity. So I was like, I got to do it. I can't say no to this. Like, I'm going to cast OGN. That's incredible. So you mentioned it before, but it was basically like something out of a movie. Like, this isn't supposed to happen in real life. I consider myself extremely lucky. Like, all of these things lining up together, and working at Azubu as like a random intern, and they were like trying to find me some random stuff to do, and all of a sudden this casting gig just like landed in my lap. And so I cast the rest of season 2. I think it was like the second half of season 2. And I ended up doing the finals with Moletrap and Double Lift, who also did the finals, who was there. I think also Loco Doco did like a little bit of casting.
Makes sense.
During that season. He wasn't on the final, but like he was doing some guest casting. I think they were really just trying to get like anybody that could speak English that could do this.
Was DoA already there this time? Had he come at this point? DoA?
Who? DoA? Yeah, he was there for StarCraft 2.
Ah, that's right.
So he was doing Code A and I think GSTL maybe, or maybe that was Caldor with Wolf. He was doing like a lot of the StarCraft 2 stuff, and then eventually transitioned to League the year after, obviously, and then the rest is history. Because I think eventually after that, OGN realized like we can't just have these random dudes coming in from like this random intern from Azubu who's just going to come in and cast, who's never cast before in his life. So they like, I guess, contacted Monte and DoA the next year, and they got real casters and ended up being a smash hit. But for me, that was my step in the door, obviously. Personally, that was like, I didn't do a very good job, but I cast and I met a lot of people. I met Theosis and Artosis after that. I met Wolf as well. And Wolf, I met him actually in China for WCG 2012. And I think Monte and DoA were also there for League and a bunch of other guys. But I met Wolf there, and he and I became very good friends. And then after that, in 2013, Azubu essentially fired me. They're like, well, we don't have any work for you to do anymore. Like, this trip is over. But I came back for studying Korean at Yonsei. So I took like 3 or 4 months in America again. And then I went back to study. And then while I was studying, I was able to do some like side gigs, casting and stuff. And then eventually that led to StarCraft 2 Pro League in 2014, which Wolf and I cast. And then from there, I was able to like build up a bunch of StarCraft 2 gigs. And then became more of like a full-time real thing.
Right, let's rewind a bit. Let's rewind a bit. Listen, that was a good overview. But if we go back, right, another thing as well that was interesting was when you said there that you could play, like, even though in StarCraft 2 you had like ladder anxiety, like, oh, I'm going to lose my points. In League, you were like, whatever, just send it, play the game. This is actually a detail that might upset modern like League and MOBA fans. But I always tell people this, right? I've been around esports the whole time, basically, Valdes. Like, maybe there's a part in the 90s I wasn't like in the scene, but I was playing the games, and actually I'd been working at the scene from literally 2001. So I always tell people, oh, MOBAs existed. Like, Dota existed, bro. All the Counter-Strike and Quake people knew it. But this will sound BM, but that was the game we all played as like the cool down game after playing like Quake 1v1 all day, or like Counter-Strike fucking 5v5 pogs, you know, like what you would do is to let off some steam, you'd just have a bunch of people on like IRC and you'd be like, oh, we'll play Dota or Dota All-Stars or whatever they called it back then. And so actually, it might sound mad to normal people because it's now like a pro game, but that was considered almost like Among Us back then, mate. Like, it wasn't considered like a serious like esport, like a hardcore game. Yeah. Is this what you're sort of implying? Because I know what you mean. Like, if you're someone who plays StarCraft, it's like Quake, mate. There's a reason it's not actually ever going to be the number one game, 1v1 StarCraft to Quake. It's too stressful. Like, you play it, you feel like you're doing an exam the whole time. In this sense, League was more of like a just chill game for you.
Absolutely. StarCraft 2, I remember I would like have to psych myself up. It was like, okay.
Right.
Because, you know, when you're like playing for fun, okay, you know, you're Gold League or whatever, like that's fine. You could lose a game. It shouldn't matter too much. Although if you're still invested, it's going to matter to some extent. But when I kind of like put these titles on myself, like aspiring pro gamer and like all this stuff, it was like all of a sudden every single game would reflect on, you know, how good I am and how I would handle a loss or how I would handle a victory and what I would do. So all of a sudden the stakes were like raised really high on top of the fact that like StarCraft 2 is a really incredibly stressful game. You just got to be really locked in. Your APM is through the roof and stuff. Whereas League was like, it was something not totally new for me. I had played Heroes of New Earth, actually. Okay. That was my first MOBA. And that was just really fun. You know, I just kind of played it with my friends, you know, wasn't trying to like go pro or anything. Again, it was kind of just like a side for fun game. Like I wasn't, you know. So when League came out, I was like, oh, okay, it's basically Heroes of New Earth, but, you know, that it's like a different kind of, because Heroes of New Earth, they like took a bunch of
They basically copied Dota as far as I can tell, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They copied the game almost exactly, but they like renamed a bunch of the champions and stuff, or the heroes. League was like kind of the same, but they had changed a bunch of stuff, and it seemed even more casual than Heroes of New Earth. And I was like, oh, this is chill, you know. And once I started playing a lot, it was just really fun. Like I wasn't super obsessed with like I'm going to be a pro gamer. I think I had learned a little bit from my StarCraft 2. I was like, I'm just gonna like play this a lot because I enjoy it. And then eventually, just through playing a lot and not having the same amount of pressure, and just the fact that the game was easier. And sometimes, you know, if you lose, it's League, you know, you blame your teammates, whatever, go next. It just didn't have as much weight, it felt like, to just play the game and to just grind it out a bunch. So, it was much easier for me to grind League compared to StarCraft 2 for sure.
This is the thing. I know you're like a very even-keeled, mild-mannered person, so I don't think this will be an offensive question to you. But put it this way, it might sound BM, but I'm not actually that surprised that like you and Moletrap got kicked out by OGN, because at the time, basically, first of all, this is actually why I asked the question about the game. The game itself, like, didn't have an esports history. Like, if people don't like when they say season one was like all amateurs and stuff. Like, if you ever go back when like Kobe won the World Cyber Games, I was there, bro. It was like a 4-team invitational tournament where like you wouldn't even be able to name like 2 people who were on those teams. Like there were no. This is like essentially like an amateur game at the time, and this is only season 2 was like 2012. In Korea, it's just begun, and as you say, like they didn't hire like these aren't like there's not like a scouting list like these are the 5 biggest casters in the world. Like if people don't know, Moletrap is a guy I already knew from fucking having a YouTube channel where he did Brood War for games, and the joke is the reason I knew him is because at the time StarCraft wasn't my game. I was a noob in StarCraft, so I was just listening to people like him because I couldn't understand like super complicated build up. I just wanted the guy who'd be like, you know, the Marines are coming up the ramp, like some noob shit, you know. Yeah. So he was there. You weren't even a person, as you say. You just won a fucking contest and got in the door. Yeah. Like it's not BM to say this. Like dude. If people don't get it, like Monty has like a background in like fucking theatre. He has crazy presence, you know. Dora's already been a caster professionally for a few years at this time. It's not even to be rude. Like essentially, when you guys began, you really did just start casting. Like there wasn't some big you weren't like years in the game. You weren't the best casters. Like, I know it'll sound weird, but I feel like you're an honest person in this sense. It's not that crazy they fired you in that sense. Look, I'm sure it's a bummer though. I'm sure you hope that you have it, like it can go somewhere, right? What would you say about that?
No, like whenever I tell a story to everybody, I'm like, it makes 100% sense that they fired us. Nothing against Mole Trap, but again, he wasn't a league guy. Really,
no.
And I was an absolute nobody. So it felt like they just picked some random people that were willing to cast the game, and they were like, please cast, and we'll pay you a tiny amount, and yeah, we were not professionals at all, especially myself. Like, Mole Trap at least had experience, like, doing camera work and some amount of casting and stuff like that. But for League, obviously, he wasn't super knowledgeable, which is why they brought in Torch, who I guess, he had like a decent amount of background knowledge in the game. He had been playing it a decent amount and following it as far as I could tell. And yeah, like, I tell that to people all the time. Like, I just got super lucky that there weren't actual real like league casters at the time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have.
And there just wasn't that much crossover, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of the other people who were doing StarCraft did great. They probably just didn't ever play League. Like, I'm sure they didn't even know the name, right?
Yeah, a lot of the StarCraft people were just like, we don't want to play this game, They
were elitists, but for good reason. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I totally understood. For me, though, I was like, I really enjoy the game and I played it a ton, so I was like, hell yeah, I'll cast League.
By the way, I'm sure for you as well, if people think about the way you explained your own story in League there, in a weird way, you could actually even argue this was good luck again, mate, because technically the original game wasn't League. You were doing that for fun. It was StarCraft. And actually, through doing this event, as you say, then go to World Cyber Games, that basically suddenly got you through that door as well. Suddenly you got to do StarCraft too. Like, there's another gig, by the way. If you're just some Westerner that nobody's ever heard of, if you try sending an email, can I cast StarCraft Pro League? They're not even going to fucking reply to that email. You know what I mean? In a mad way, actually, you could argue that it was luckier to get the StarCraft gig, right? Isn't that kind of what you really wanted to do?
Gig afterwards?
Yeah.
Like in 2014?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was like the fact that I met Wolf and I was able to essentially, what he would do in 2013 was like, so Gom TV at the time, they were doing mostly StarCraft 2, but they were also doing like a bunch of other stuff like World of Tanks and Counter-Strike Online.
Oh,
which I
sure.
think was popular in Asia at the time. And they just didn't have people. Like, they were like, Wolf, do you know anybody? And Wolf's like, well, I know this guy. He doesn't have a lot of experience, but I see his potential, And so they were like, okay, literally throw anybody on this broadcast. We don't care, dude. And that allowed me to get my foot in the door doing like a lot more casting throughout the year of 2013. And then essentially with Pro League as well, SpoTV was looking for new casters, and they had contacted Wolf, and Wolf was like, well, I know this guy, and obviously I told him, and we had talked about it a lot, that I had played a lot of StarCraft 2, like tons and tons of hours, even through the ladder anxiety, and that I had a good background, that I had watched all the games and followed all the GSLs and stuff. So, even though I didn't have a lot of experience through casting, it still felt like I would be a good fit for, again, SpoTV wasn't looking for like a very established, expensive person at the time. They were looking for like the totally new guys that they could pay a very small amount to do.
Yeah, happy to be there.
I was like, yeah, absolutely. Am I getting paid for it? Yes, yeah, sure. I'll do it. And it wasn't like tiny, but it was, it was barely enough to get by in Korea at the time. And that was enough for me because I just lived in a tiny apartment, and I just wanted to cast as much as possible. So it was very much like a just get my foot in the door kind of deal. After the first couple of years were very wishy-washy, like here and there kind of gigs.
By the way, I actually wanted to briefly come out of the esports side and ask you some questions about living in Korea, because actually, fully enough, the time you're describing is actually when I met you in real life, when I came to Korea and was doing like a bunch of interviews and stuff. And then I did the same thing a lot of people do. You come for the trip first time, you go, I should do this again. And then you just get drawn into living there, and eventually you just never leave, potentially. So one of the things when I met you was, this is actually when you were just, I think you were just actually slightly before you started doing StarCraft. Because the funny thing is, you were already hanging out with Wolf anyway, right? The question I have is this. I was actually shocked because at the time I knew a lot of people who either they knew Korean but nothing about esports. Like they really did just move there to be an English teacher, and they were from like America or UK or something. Or they came for esports, and then the famous joke used to be, people who used to say this to like tasters and stuff, is like, do you know Korean yet? And they'd be like, I really should start classes again or whatever. And then everyone always put it off, because the problem everyone always used to say was, like I said about myself, when you initially go there, you don't really think you're going to be there for 5 years. So everyone goes, I'll be gone next year, so I'll do a little bit. But then what they find is it's a really hard language if you speak like English compared to like, Spanish or something that has essentially has almost no connection whatsoever. So because it's so difficult, if people even do, by the way, most people don't even start the classes, but if they even do start the classes, a lot of people just go like, fuck, I'm going to get nowhere in like a year or so. One of the things I was impressed with you is you really did actually properly commit to it. Like you told me back then, you weren't just doing like a book, you were going to like classes like multiple times a week, right? And essentially doing it as if you were trying to like fully learn the language, right?
Yeah, that was kind of like my way to get back to Korea, was to try to find some kind of course that allowed me to get a student visa. And I only had like 1 year in university in America, so I wasn't like going to transfer my credits and try to go to like Korean university. That seemed like a pretty large step. So I looked into the language courses, and I found one at Yonsei, which seemed to be pretty popular, at least amongst like Americans or like Westerners. At least like one of the courses they offered, but I actually went to like the really hardcore course that was like 20 hours a week. So it was 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. And that was for 10 weeks was one level. So it was a total of 200 course hours of just Korean. Like, they don't teach the classes in like English or whatever, because I was like surrounded by Chinese people, Japanese people, some other Westerners as well that were in there, some Turkish people, stuff like that. So the whole course was only in Korean, the whole thing. And I did up until like level 5.5. So I did like 1,100 hours of just Korean study. It started out as just a way to get a visa and to get back into the country, but again, like I was very invested in living in Korea, staying in Korea, especially after I got a taste and I had casted OGN. I was like, oh, I gotta stay here. I gotta find a way. So, especially through talking to Wolf as well, because he was very much, Wolf is extremely good at Korean, which for anyone who doesn't know, he was very much like, you gotta learn Korean. Like if you're gonna come to Korea, you're not just gonna be one of those people who kind of like gets by with like, oh, can I have one beer, please? And like, that's the only Korean you know. You have to, if you're going to be a lifer, you have to actually learn the language as much as possible. And it worked out because I wasn't a full-time caster at that time in 2013. So I took that entire year and just basically studied on, like, focused on only studying Korean. And then like the side gigs with Wolf was basically just a way for me to have a little extra pocket money. So yeah, it was essentially like a full-time committal to just learning Korean. And I thought I would go like all the way to level 6, but once I started doing Pro League for StarCraft 2 in 2014, it became a lot harder to attend all these classes because it was morning classes. So I had to get there at 9 a.m. and after casting all night and then like going out for some drinks afterwards, miss some classes, fall behind, it became a little bit less enticing. So, and it was getting really hard because level 5 is, I remember I had a teacher, I think it was level 3, where she was like, please, please, please study all the way to level 6. Like, you are one of the few Westerners that I think has the ability to do this.
Right.
Because, as you mentioned, like, English and Korean could not be farther apart. Like, the grammar is different, the intonation.
Give us like give someone if someone doesn't know anything at all, give them a sense. Because I'll give you an example. Right, this is something I've often had to try and explain. I don't even speak Korean to people. In the case of League, when you have the LCK pros go to the LPL, because they'll see like that an LCK pro was there for 2 years, and they'll be like, "I'm sure he speaks Mandarin." I'm like, "What?" No, like, bro, if he even did the classes, which some of them do in the modern day, to be fair, like, he'll be like a little kid even after 2 or 3 years. Like, it's like, am I off on that? As far as I know, like, even if you do like your sort of classes where you're doing hours every day, it's not like, but it's, as I say, that people don't realize how much of a connection there is in like European languages. If I went tomorrow, Valdes, to Spain, lived in Spain and did classes in Spanish there, bro, within like a year, I could probably do like conversational stuff. I wouldn't be mega, they'd know I was a foreigner, but I'd be able to get into the, as far as I was told by all the people I know, like you'd be barely anywhere after a year in Korea. Is it true?
It is true. I think, especially with speaking, the school that I went to, Yonsei, kind of focuses more on like getting people ready to go to Korean university afterwards. Right. So it was a bit more focused on like reading and writing and stuff. But even if you do go to some of the other universities that focus more on speaking, like you're going to be stumbling, like barely saying sentences, even after a year. Like I remember after the first year out of Yonsei, especially because they weren't focused on speaking, like I had a lot of knowledge, but I had no real confidence to speak at all. It was only after many more years of living in Korea and having eventually a Korean girlfriend and wife now, and like speaking with her and learning with her and stuff like that and taking it very slow, was I able to get to a level where I felt somewhat confident. Like English and Korean are extremely different. I think Korean and Japanese are very similar, and then right. Chinese is similar in the sense that they share a lot of vocab. Like a lot of the Korean words come from Chinese words right. and stuff like that. So they get a lot of the vocabulary pretty easily if you're a Korean going to China. But unless you're like really smart, like someone like Viper or Tarzan, a couple of those guys that actually do speak decent Mandarin, like it is incredibly difficult to learn Mandarin, to learn Korean, especially for Westerners. So by the time I got to like level 3, level 4, I was like one of maybe 3 or 4 Westerners that were still in this like hardcore class. Everybody else was like Chinese and Japanese because it was much easier for them because Korean is much closer to their language, whereas English is much closer to the romantic languages, as you mentioned. So it's just like really difficult, which is also why Wolf is really impressive because he never did any of these classes. No, right?
Bro, like him and DoA legit blow my mind because they actually just have that crazy like personality where they're not scared to speak it. And so, bro, like DoA, I don't even think took classes, bro. He was just talking to like taxi drivers and just trying to like figure it out on the fly. And I was like, holy shit, you must have to have crazy self-confidence to do that. I know what you mean. Same with Wolf. Like you'd never know Wolf took a class, bro. He was just fucking talking to people the whole time, right?
Yeah. He just pushed through it, like through the awkwardness. I know he went on like a lot of dates and stuff, and a lot of like going out with Korean guys as well, just like forcibly like trying to, look silly essentially. Which
I love the way it's like he's grinding the ladder in StarCraft. He's just making himself play us. I love it.
Yeah, and I went to I got coaching from someone for a long time.
I've got a question about this though, right? Yeah. I forget which one it was, because I obviously did one of these with Atlas and with Wolf. One of the two of them, I forget which one, told me though, that like, even though you know Korean, that you still like hide your power level, that you like stealth with it. It's like you won't go out your way to show people you know it, but like secretly if someone speaks to you, they'll be like, holy shit, he's right. Is it true? Do you still hide it a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what it is. I think there's still something in the back of my mind where I'm like, a little bit embarrassed still, even though I can speak it totally fine and I understand everything they're saying. I guess I just never could fully get through that boundary in my brain to just essentially say like, no, I speak Korean, like let's just speak Korean. There's just like a little bit of awkwardness to get through the phase of like every single time, especially if you're a Westerner and you speak Korean, they're like, oh, you're so good at Korean.
Sure.
Say something, can we speak more, like stuff like this. It can get a little bit awkward at times, but especially with people that already know that I speak Korean, it's very easy to just speak it and not feel any awkwardness and stuff. But yeah, it is true. It must have been Wolf because I think he knows just how good I am at the language, but the fact that for him, if anyone speaks Korean and if there's any misunderstanding or awkwardness at all, right from the get-go, he's just like right in there speaking Korean, fixing the problem, whatever.
Right.
Whereas I'll be a little bit more laid back and just wait and see what happens and stuff like that.
By the way, one thing I always wanted to know, because I've known a lot of people who went to Korea, but maybe they just went for a Western company, or maybe, like in my case, I didn't even work there. I used to tell people, the bizarre thing is, I actually just like the country. All my work was in the Western Counter-Strike, but that's the joke. But in your case, you actually worked with Korean companies. So what I want to ask is this question. Another thing I know from knowing people like Wolf and Monty is you also, just like in the West, you have to learn, like, how do I speak to my boss? Like, what's the politics of the office and stuff? I've heard also you have to, like, level up in that sense in Korean culture because, again, the real problem people have is this. It's not that they actively misunderstand people. It's that when cultural markers are different, you just don't even know that they're different to know to bridge the gap sometimes. So, like, I've seen when you have those, like, casting gigs, this might sound mad to a Westerner, but actually it seems like a lot of the work of, like, becoming friends, like you say, Korean culture is it's after work that we all go out and drink and stuff. I've seen it's super important to go to those, like, post-rap parties and try and meet all the producers and talk to people. And even if they're people, by the way, on the Korean broadcast, you have to sort of, like, ingratiate yourself and feel it. Was this the case for you? I mean, you seem like a little bit more of a reserved person. Have you done a good job in that sense? Did you have to do that with your Korean co-workers and bosses and stuff? Did you put yourself out there?
I think you just kind of have to, right? I think it helps that I always had somebody with me that was very outgoing. And, in the beginning it was Wolf. We had like the SpoTV after parties and they all knew that he could speak Korean. And we would just go up to them and he'd say, "Oh yeah, Brendan also speaks Korean," even though at the time I was like, I don't know about that. But the thing is, Wolf did such a good job of explaining all of that. Like he really... he's really good at like understanding, what's important about a situation or if you're going to succeed in a
But it's, I'm not even trolling. It almost is like how he must view games, bro. Like he has like the same mindset to getting good at things in life as get. Because like I always tell people, it's the reason why he's the only guy that ever just was an analyst in like every fucking esports game. And like you're saying, even when I was asking him one time in Korea about like what I do in the club, he was explaining like how you meet and talk to Korean girls as if it was like telling me how to play like fucking a six pool for Zerg in StarCraft or something. Like this guy's brain just works this way.
Yeah, no, he has the build order for everything.
Yes.
If you want to learn to get in with the Korean PD, he knows exactly what you got to do.
Right.
How are you going to pour the soju? What is your approach? Who's the important guy in the room, et cetera, et cetera. So he was just so good. Like he told me about all of this before I even started working in Pro League. He was like, "Oh, these Korean after parties. This is what you got to do. You got to go in and you got to make sure you get these people drunk and you start drinking with them and you join their table and like you talk to them about next year and et cetera, et cetera." It is just really important to go back to your original question to understand the Korean work culture because it is very different. To be honest, most of that for me is like from what I've heard though, because I never really worked in an American company. I don't have experience doing that because I came here when I was 20 years old. So I had done one internship and that was like with my dad's friend's company, right? So it was very easy for me to just kind of do that. But that was basically just like 9 to 5, show up and be an intern and then leave. And that was about it. Whereas in Korea, it was just totally different. And people are generally pretty guarded if they don't know who you are, and they're going to be very kind and nice to you, but at the same time you're not gonna break through any kind of friendship boundary unless generally it's you go out and drink with them, and after an event where you both worked hard on it together, you go up and you say, "Oh, you worked hard," and you exchange kind of like, "Oh, we worked on the same project together," and you have all these mutual feelings even if you don't know each other very well, and then eventually through the help of alcohol and the right environment, they become more open and it becomes much easier to actually interact and engage with the people in the company. We're generally pretty reserved and not, they don't speak a lot of English. So they're worried like, "Oh, like, can I talk to this guy who doesn't speak Korean?" And just so many different like boundaries that you have to break through in order to become close with them. So Wolf was very good at explaining all of that before I even got into my first after work party. So that was very helpful.
By the way, as people can already tell in this interview, actually meeting Wolf, you could also argue, is maybe the most important thing that happened in your esports career, right? Like, in StarCraft, I remember when you guys did Pro League, that basically became like the duo at one point in time. You were like his main guy. So did you immediately just hit it off? Is there some sort of like, I mean, he tells some story about like at the World Cyber Games, he just like got out of an elevator or something like, hey, and then you just like became friends after that or something mad. Like, is there just some special connection between the two of you?
That is what happened. They were going up to, I think it was DoA's room, and obviously they all knew each other. I don't know if Monty was there, but there were a couple other guys and Wolf, and I was the total noob. I knew nobody, and I wasn't gonna just invite myself to the party, so I was like, I would go if they invited me, but they didn't say anything. But I got off at my floor, and then Wolf held the door before it closed. He's like, wait, do you want to come join us? And I'm like, yeah. Kind of the invitation I was hoping for. And then he and I just kind of drank all night. And I don't know what it was. We just had very similar personalities and stuff that we've like core values, I guess you could say, because we talked a lot like that night and the nights afterwards, and then going back to Korea because World Cyber Games was in China. And yeah, just kind of hit it off. I don't really know exactly what it is, but I think we both had very similar goals and values at the time, especially, and both really loved Korea. Both wanted to succeed as casters, or at least finding some kind of permanent job in Korea. In my case, so I was like, I got to get in there. I got to meet Wolf. I got to do all these things, and we just hit it off.
By the way, as someone who knows him, how would you explain him? Because, for example, if people are watching this and they're from the League background, I would say in StarCraft he actually had a lot more stasis and he was well respected, etc. And actually, obviously, grinded in Korea, so people knew knew the game super well. But because he came into League way later than everyone else, I do think there were some people who were like elitists in League, like, oh, you just can't even know what he's talking about. And I always used to say, like, I'm not the friend, by the way, who tells people like, oh, just keep your head down, And I used to tell him, like, bro, if you were that good in all the other games, you should just have strong opinions, think, because obviously people know he's also the sort of person that gets super into the game like that, so it's like, likes to argue if this person's better or that's better. And if you do that, obviously some fans are going to get really upset. They want you to be super neutral if you do the Korean games. So give me some sense. Who is Wolf as a person and a personality? What's he like? Why is he the way people see him?
So he has really, really strong opinions. I think that's like the first thing. When you meet Wolf, he will make it very clear, not in a mean way or like an assholey way. He's just like, if you're talking about anything, if it's esports, if it's politics, if it's work or whatever, he'll just say like, this is what I think and this is why I think it. And he's very like, he sticks to that very well, so even if he's new to something or he doesn't have 100% knowledge of whatever it is, he will say, this is what I think. I've formed this opinion. He won't just like watch a bunch of odds and see what other people are saying and like, oh, I've heard that this is the way it goes and this is the build. He'll be like, no, like I need to go in there and play this champion 20 times and figure it out for myself. Which I think is his biggest strength, but also it can be a weakness at times when coming into LCK, something that's been around for a very long time, and people have a certain expectation of what to get from a caster. And they have like somebody new who comes in and has really strong opinions who they don't necessarily trust. They're going to be like, whoa, like, do you really, like, does this guy even know what he's talking about? Why is he coming in here and like arguing with Atlas or whatever? So that's really the big thing about Wolf that makes him such a strong caster, because it's good to have people who kind of have like a community view and have a lot of connections and can talk with pro gamers, et cetera. But it's also good to have kind of like a new, a new way to look at things, you could say, or just like a new viewpoint on something, even if it is a game that's been around for a long time. I mean, like there's champions and builds and stuff that people are still finding out today.
Sure.
And stuff like that. So you want to have somebody who's not scared to take like a look with fresh eyes at something that is very old as a game now, which League of Legends is. So it can be his weakness, because I know that in like the first couple of years, he might have said some things that he wasn't 100% sure about, and like maybe got in some trouble with, like maybe it was wrong, maybe it wasn't exactly correct, or he didn't word it the right way, or stuff like that. But that's just kind of who he is. So none of us were worried about that. Obviously, like the fans might get angry or whatever, but we were just like, okay, like that's just Wolf. And eventually he figured it out, and he acknowledges that himself personally, that, it was a little bit rocky at first, but at the same time, I think he's really come into his own as like a league analyst just because of that that strong-willed, like strong opinionated mindset of, being an esports caster, because, the guys that will come in and know everything about everything from hearing it from somebody else are a dime a dozen, I feel. Especially nowadays, where there are so many people trying to become casters.
Are you someone where, when you did StarCraft 2, did it actually live up to what you hoped? Essentially, like we said, you could have only dreamed about casting StarCraft 2 before the league stuff and before you did it. When you actually got to do it, did it live up to the hype? Was it what you wanted it to be?
I mean, to be honest, like after I had done OGN, like I was a big league guy at that point, so I had like already kind of made a full transition, I guess you could say, over to the league side. So I was I very much wanted to continue doing league, but obviously I didn't have that opportunity because of getting fired in 2012 and Monte and DoA coming in. But what I will say is that I still love StarCraft 2, and when I started casting it, I was like, it had this feeling of, okay, I've made it. Like, this is a full-time gig. I'm a real caster now. And then enjoying that and trying to get as good as I possibly could, and just grinding out as many casts as possible. And also just the lifestyle. It was very free. Even though it was 3 days a week, I mean, that's only 3 casts a week. And I had 4 days off to just be like a young kid in Korea and just kind of go out and party and have a good time. So, I very much was, it was hard not to be enamored with the lifestyle, like it was a very good time living in Korea as a young adult. And casting the game itself, like there were definitely some challenges there where I had to learn like the new metas and stuff. But it was still very comfortable, especially because I had Wolf. But the only issue was that I still wasn't a real caster at that time. Like I had only done gigs throughout 2013, and 2012 barely count. So most of like 2014 and 2015 was like figuring out what is my personality going to be as a caster? What are my strengths? Should I be a host? Should I be an analyst? Stuff like that. So there was a lot of thinking and brainstorming about, how I could be better and what exactly I was going to kind of master or be best at in my casting.
One thing I wondered from your perspective is, I actually know from knowing people who are Westerners who came specifically for StarCraft 2, that one thing that for some of them was a little bit jarring, and maybe a lot of Westerners maybe to this day don't even know this, is that StarCraft 2 as a game was never as big as Brood War was in Korea. So even though you'd have like GSL and Pro League and all this esports stuff, and the top teams and the Kesper teams came over, I've heard that, I mean, I've even seen it. If you ever went to the PC cafe, you'd almost never see anyone play StarCraft 2. But the joke is, I've been just to log into my Gmail, and some old guy sat next to me started playing Brood War, and I was like, and this is in 2018 or something ridiculous. So like it actually is a real thing. It's why actually it surprised me that ESL and stuff that exists. Like StarCraft 1 kind of never went away. What was your experience in that sense? Did you feel like StarCraft 2 wasn't as present there? Because I know obviously it was a massive Western game, but it's kind of true, right? In Korea it was a bit more limited interest.
Yeah, it definitely was. The Brood War leagues were always, I think they had like more people going, and they always had more people talking about it. And I know that even some of the people that were working on StarCraft 2, like the Korean people, were like, man, I wish I were doing StarCraft 1. Or they were like watching a stream on their phone, like while they're doing their job here at StarCraft 2. They're like, man, I wish I was doing Brood War. For me personally, I was a Age of Empires guy. I never did Brood War at all. Unfortunately, I just totally avoided Brood War throughout my life. I just played Age of Empires 1, Age of Empires 2. I had never heard of StarCraft until StarCraft 2 came out. So I was like one of the new guys. So for me personally, I was like, yeah, I get that Brood War is bigger and that it holds this kind of like classic, this nostalgic feel for so many, like pretty much everybody. I would say almost every single person that was working on StarCraft 2 would feel like either they wanted to be doing StarCraft 1 or they had done that for a while and they're happy doing StarCraft 2 and they're just happy to be doing StarCraft in general. Or they, there were some people that like StarCraft 2 as well and they liked it better. Or there wasn't anybody who didn't know about Brood War, in Korea. It was like every single person had played it. Like if you were doing StarCraft 2, you would have played Brood War with your friends at the PC cafe. Even to this day, like you go into the PC cafe, there are like most of the people are playing, I guess, League nowadays, but there will still be people playing StarCraft, Brood War in 2025. I mean, heck, even my wife, who is not a gamer at all, like she doesn't play games at all. She remembers playing Brood War with her friends, like after school.
But it's weird. If people think this is an exaggeration, I had a similar experience. I was once in Korea, like 10 years ago, and I had a girlfriend who knew nothing about esports, bro. She didn't even know what I did in esports. She didn't know nothing about Counter-Strike. And one time when I said something about StarCraft, I think I said something like, do you want to go to a StarCraft final? Because Monte had tickets. She was telling me all stuff about how she used to play Protoss when she was like 12 years old. So like, what? And she wasn't a gamer at all, bro. It's just that people told me back then, everyone did it as a teenager, right? It was just kind of like, it was like, essentially, I always tell Westerners, it's like playing with Pokemon cards or something. Like everyone did it at some point in their life, right?
Yeah. Almost every single person, I think, has that experience. There's not a single person that I go to and talk to. They could be a gamer, they could be not. And they will have said, the least you would get is like, oh, I know, like all my friends used to play that. Even if they didn't play it, they would be like, oh yeah, like they used to go to the PC Bong all the time. Right. Like, and I didn't play it, but like, obviously it was a huge thing back when I was a kid. So yeah, there's a reason why that was the game in Korea, because literally just every single person knew about it, and just glad to have that foundation to make what we have today. Otherwise, we would not exist.
Now, you never catch me dolo online because I'm rolling deep and we dem boys. Who am I talking about? The Illuminati. So this video and the content on my channel is kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Gore, Nikki, Jason, you know who my second in command is, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Would you like to ask me a question in an AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where you get to set the topic? Maybe you want to see who upcoming guests are in my interviews and on my talk shows. Well, all of these perks and more are available to you if you put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today. How? Via the Patreon link in the description box below. You dig?